I grew up in rural Georgia, about 40 minutes outside of Macon. My dad worked construction his whole life, and after high school I ended up doing the same thing. Most of my jobs were small-town work. Roofing, framing, clearing land, pouring concrete pads for trailers. Stuff like that. A few years ago, when I was 31, I started doing side jobs with a guy named Curtis. He owned a skid steer and a trailer and got hired constantly to clear old properties people inherited but didn't want anymore. One October, we got hired by this older woman who had inherited about 12 acres from her brother after he died. The property had been abandoned for years somewhere deep off a county road. She wanted the place cleaned enough to eventually sell it. The first day we drove out there, it already felt wrong. Not haunted wrong, just isolated. The driveway was basically gone. Branches scraped both sides of Curtis's truck getting in there. The trees hung low enough in some spots that you had to duck inside the cab. We passed an old mailbox with no numbers left on it, just rust and bullet holes. The house itself sat far back from the road, surrounded by pine trees. Small single-story place with sagging porch steps and broken windows. There was also a detached garage leaning sideways like it might collapse any second. The woman told us nobody had lived there in at least 8 years. That wasn't true. We noticed signs immediately. Not obvious signs at first. Just little things. A fresh cigarette but near the porch. A crushed energy drink can that still had condensation inside. The back door hanging slightly open. Curtis looked at me and said, "You armed?" I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. He kept a revolver under his truck seat anytime we worked rural jobs because apparently people stumbled across squatters all the time. We yelled a few times before going inside the house. Nobody answered. The smell hit first. Not death. More like mildew, wet carpet, old food, and something sour underneath all of it. The living room looked abandoned except for one thing. A sleeping bag, right in the middle of the floor. There were canned foods stacked near the wall too. Bottles of water, flashlights, propane lantern.
Curtis mattered. Hell no.
We backed out immediately. The smart thing would have been leaving then, but the property owner lived almost 2 hours away and kept insisting maybe homeless people had wandered through recently. She said if we just stayed near the front area and cleared brush first, she'd pay extra. So we stayed. Most of the morning went normal. I used a chainsaw cutting smaller trees while Curtis used the skid steer pushing brush piles deeper into the woods. Around noon, we took lunch sitting on the tailgate. That's when we heard the whistle. 3 short notes, way off in the woods behind us. Curtis stopped chewing immediately. I remember laughing awkwardly and saying maybe hunters were nearby. Then another whistle answered farther left. Same pattern. Curtis stood up slowly and looked toward the trees. "People use whistles like that to communicate," he said quietly. The woods went silent after that. No birds. No insects. Nothing. We decided to finish 1 more hour then leave early. About 20 minutes later, Curtis radioed me from near the backside of the property. His voice sounded weird. "Come here a second." I walked through the brush toward him and saw the skid steer parked crooked near an old wire fence. Curtis pointed down. Fresh footprints. Barefoot. Deep enough in the mud that they had to be recent. And they were everywhere. Like someone had been standing there watching us for a long time. The footprints led into the woods behind the fence line. I remember feeling embarrassed for being scared because footprints alone aren't that crazy. Then Curtis pointed again. There were smaller footprints too, child-sized. We left immediately after that. While Curtis loaded equipment onto the trailer, I walked back toward the house to grab my water bottle near the porch. That's when I saw movement inside. Someone looking through the broken living room window. Just a face for half a second. Pale skin, long dark hair, then gone. I yelled automatically. No answer. Curtis came jogging over asking what happened. I told him somebody was inside. He grabbed the revolver from the truck and told me to stay back. We approached the porch together. The front door stood open now. I swear it hadn't been before. Curtis yelled into the house saying we were armed and calling police. Nothing answered. Then from somewhere deeper inside the house, we heard laughing. Not loud, soft, almost childlike. Curtis stopped moving entirely. The laugh happened again, closer this time. Then a voice said, "Don't leave yet." I felt every hair on my neck stand up instantly. Curtis backed off the porch immediately and told me to get in the truck. As we hurried away, I looked back once toward the side of the house. 3 people stood near the tree line watching us. 1 woman, 2 children. At least I thought they were children. They were all barefoot, and none of them moved while we drove away. Police actually did go out there later that evening. They found signs people had been living in the woods behind the property. Makeshift shelters, food containers, blankets, but nobody was there anymore. The weirdest part happened 2 days later. The property owner called Curtis furious because someone had completely destroyed the inside of the house overnight. Windows smashed, walls spray painted, furniture piled together and burned. And written across one wall in black paint were the words, "You shouldn't have come back." The property still sits abandoned now. At least last I heard. Nobody bought it. My name's Aaron, and this happened in northern Idaho during winter about 5 years ago. I had just moved into a duplex outside a tiny town near Coeur d'Alene after separating from my wife. It wasn't a bad place. Cheap rent, quiet area, lots of trees around. The landlord mostly rented to people working temporary construction jobs nearby. The building itself was old. Not charming old either. Creaking floors, thin walls, weird plumbing noises at night. But I didn't care because I was depressed and honestly just needed somewhere to sleep. The downstairs unit beside mine stayed empty most of the time. The landlord said a previous tenant skipped out suddenly and left damage behind. The first month there was normal except for one thing. I kept hearing noises underneath the floor. At first I thought it was pipes, then mice, but sometimes it sounded heavier than that, like shifting weight. The duplex had a crawl space beneath it accessible through a hatch outside near the back. One night around midnight, I woke up hearing 3 loud knocks directly under my bed. Boom, boom, boom. I sat there frozen listening. Then silence. I remember grabbing my phone flashlight and checking the whole apartment feeling stupid. Nothing. The next morning, I told the landlord about possible animals underneath the place. He shrugged it off and said raccoons sometimes got under there during winter. The noises kept happening though, always late at night, dragging sounds, soft thumps, sometimes what sounded like coughing. I started sleeping with the TV on just to drown it out. A week later things got worse. I came home from work and noticed my bathroom cabinet open. I lived alone. I knew I'd shut it before leaving. Then a few days later my shower curtain was partially closed when I always kept it open. Little things like that slowly eat at your brain because you keep trying to rationalize them. One Friday night, I invited my coworker Nate over to drink beer and watch football. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, while we were sitting in the living room, we both heard movement underneath us. Very clear movement, like someone crawling. Nate muted the TV immediately. We listened as something scraped slowly beneath the floorboards from the kitchen area toward the hallway. I remember the exact expression on Nate's face because it matched mine perfectly. Confusion turning into fear. Then we heard coughing. A human cough. Right underneath us. Nate whispered, "Dude, somebody's under there." We grabbed flashlights and went outside. Snow covered most of the ground around the duplex except near the crawlspace hatch. The hatch stood slightly open. I know for a fact it had been closed earlier because I parked near it every day. Nate grabbed a shovel from his truck. We approached slowly. The smell coming from the crawl space was horrible, like sweat, mildew, and rotten food. I shined my flashlight inside. At first, all I saw were pipes and dirt. Then eyes reflected back at me. A person was lying underneath the floor, maybe 15 feet in. I stumbled backwards so fast I fell into the snow. The person started moving immediately deeper into the darkness. Nate yelled, "Hey!" No answer. Just fast crawling sounds disappearing farther beneath the building. We called police immediately. 2 deputies arrived about 30 minutes later. Neither seemed overly concerned at first until they looked inside themselves. One deputy actually crawled partially underneath with a flashlight and came back out pale. There was evidence someone had been living under the duplex for a while. Blankets, food wrappers, water bottles. Even worse, there was a small battery lantern and piles of stolen items. Women's clothes, wallets, photographs. The deputies searched for nearly an hour but never found the person. Apparently, the crawl space connected through broken foundation areas into the empty neighboring unit. That's when everything clicked. Someone had likely been entering the vacant apartment regularly and moving beneath both units. The police asked if anything had gone missing from my apartment. I initially said no. Then I checked carefully. A hoodie was gone, my spare flashlight, and weirdly enough, framed pictures of me and my ex-wife had been moved face down. The deputy asked if I'd ever left doors unlocked. I told him sometimes during the day. He looked genuinely disturbed hearing that. For the next week, I barely slept. Every sound made me panic. The landlord installed stronger locks and sealed the crawlspace access shut with heavy boards and metal brackets. I thought it was over. Then came the final night. Around 3 a.m., I woke up because my bedroom felt freezing cold. My window was open slightly. I know I locked it before bed because snow had been blowing hard earlier. As I sat up, I heard breathing. Not outside. Inside my room. Very soft. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. Nothing. But my closet door stood open. I always slept with it closed. I grabbed the handgun from my nightstand and backed toward the bedroom light switch. The moment the lights came on, I saw muddy footprints across the carpet leading from the window to the closet. Police came again. They searched everything. Nobody was there. But inside the closet behind hanging jackets, they found insulation fibers and dirt packed into the corner like someone had been crouching there. The officer asked how long the closet door had been closed before I opened it. I told him maybe 10 seconds. He just stared at me quietly after that. I moved out 3 days later. Months afterward, Nate sent me an article from a local Facebook page. A man had finally been arrested breaking into cabins near the woods outside town. The article mentioned he sometimes hid underneath buildings for days watching people before entering their homes at night. The mugshot looked familiar, not because I'd seen him clearly before, but because I recognized the eyes reflecting back from the darkness under the crawlspace. My name's Ethan, and this happened in Western North Carolina about 7 years ago. I've told the story maybe 3 times in my life because even now it sounds exaggerated when I say it out loud. But every single thing happened exactly how I remember it. Back then, I was 28 and working for a small pest control company. Mostly boring work. Crawl spaces, hornet nests, raccoons in attics, that kind of thing. The pay sucked, but it kept bills paid after my divorce. I lived alone in a tiny rental house outside a mountain town near the Tennessee border. One of those places tourists think looks peaceful until they actually stay there long enough to realize how isolated everything really is. The nearest Walmart was 40 minutes away. Cell service disappeared constantly. At night, the roads got so dark your headlights felt weak. I liked it at first because after the divorce I wanted quiet. Then winter came. The mountains get different during winter. Everything feels empty. Trees lose their leaves. Fog hangs low over the roads, and sounds carry weird through the woods. I spent most evenings alone watching TV or drinking beer on the couch, trying not to think too much about life. Around November, I started hiking this trail near an old abandoned fire tower on my days off. It wasn't a popular trail anymore because newer lookout towers replaced it years ago. The parking area only fit maybe 4 vehicles, and half the time mine was the only truck there. The hike itself wasn't hard. About 2 miles uphill through thick woods until you reached the tower clearing. The tower had been locked up for years. Rust everywhere. Missing stairs near the top. Most people ignored it because newer hiking spots opened nearby with better views. But I liked the isolation. The first weird thing happened on a cloudy Thursday afternoon. I'd parked around noon and started hiking up the trail carrying water and headphones. About halfway up, I noticed another vehicle parked farther down near the road. Old white van. No windows on the sides. I remember noticing because it looked out of place there. No bumper stickers. No company logo. Just plain white with dirt splashed all over the sides. Didn't think much about it. I finished the hike, sat near the tower a while, then headed back down before sunset. The van was still there when I left. Again, not weird by itself. But as I drove away, I passed it slowly and noticed nobody inside. No movement. No lights. Nothing. I forgot about it until the next week when I came back. Same van. Parked in the exact same area. That time it bothered me a little because there weren't many trails nearby. And if somebody was hiking, where were they going for an entire week? Still, I ignored it. People camp in weird places all the time. The second strange thing happened near the tower itself. I'd reached the clearing and noticed smoke drifting through the trees behind the fire tower. Not campfire smoke exactly. More like somebody burning wet wood. I walked around the backside of the clearing expecting maybe hunters or campers. Instead, I found a campsite, or what looked like one. There was a tarp stretched low between trees and shopping carts filled with random junk. Blankets, buckets, plastic containers. Tons of empty cans. The smoke came from a burn barrel. Nobody was there though. I remember immediately feeling uncomfortable because the campsite looked lived in recently. Not abandoned. There was even a radio quietly playing somewhere under the tarp. Country music. Very low volume. I called out asking if anybody was around. Nothing answered. Then I noticed something hanging from a tree branch nearby. Photographs. Dozens of photographs clipped to fishing line with clothespins. At first I thought maybe somebody was developing pictures outdoors or something weird like that. Then I got closer. They were pictures of people. Mostly hikers. Some standing near trail signs. Some unloading vehicles. Some sitting at the overlook near the tower. Every photo looked taken from far away without the people knowing. My stomach dropped immediately. There must have been 40 or 50 pictures hanging there moving slightly in the wind. Men, women, couples, families, and some looked recent. One photo actually showed the parking area with my truck in it. I stared at it trying to remember when someone could have taken it. The angle looked hidden, like from the woods. That's when I heard movement behind me. Fast movement. I turned instantly expecting somebody to attack me. But all I saw was brush shaking deeper in the trees. I yelled again asking who was there. No answer. I left immediately after that. I remember forcing myself not to run because I didn't want whoever might be nearby realizing how scared I was. But halfway back down the trail, I started hearing footsteps behind me. Slow footsteps, matching my pace. Whenever I stopped walking, they stopped too. The woods there were quiet enough that you could hear every leaf crunch. I told myself it was another hiker, except I never saw anyone. I sped up. The footsteps sped up too. I finally turned around and shouted, "What do you want?" Nothing, just trees. Then somewhere off to my left, I heard whistling. 3 short notes, almost playful. I started moving downhill faster after that. The trail curved a lot, and every few seconds I'd glance back expecting someone to appear behind me. At one point, I swear I saw a person standing between two trees uphill from me. Tall, dark jacket, completely still. The second I looked directly at him, he stepped backward behind the tree trunk and disappeared. I practically jogged the rest of the way down. When I reached the parking area, my truck was the only vehicle left, except for the white van, parked closer now, right beside my driver's side door. I stopped walking immediately. Every instinct told me not to go near it. The van's windshield was tinted enough I couldn't see inside clearly. I remember standing there maybe 40 feet away debating whether to run back up the trail or just sprint for my truck. Then I heard a metallic sound behind me, like something hitting a rock. I turned around fast. Nobody there. When I looked back toward the van again, the side door was open. I swear to God it had been closed seconds earlier. Inside looked dark. Too dark. Like blankets were hanging over the windows from inside. Then I heard breathing. Not loud, but close. From somewhere near the trees beside the parking area. I didn't wait anymore. I sprinted for my truck, unlocked it, and jumped inside so fast I almost dropped my keys. The engine started immediately. As I backed out, I looked once toward the van. Someone was standing behind it. A man, tall and skinny, wearing a camouflage jacket and dark baseball cap. What scared me wasn't his appearance. It was the fact he wasn't reacting at all. He just watched me calmly, like he already knew exactly how scared I was. I drove straight home. I told myself not to go back there again. But curiosity is stupid sometimes. About a week later, I returned with my friend Caleb because I wanted somebody else to see the campsite and tell me I was overreacting. We arrived around noon. No van this time. That made me feel slightly better. We hiked to the tower normally, joking around most of the way. But the moment we reached the clearing, I knew something was wrong. The campsite was gone. Completely gone.
No tarp. No vernberel.
Nothing. The entire area looked clean, spotless. Caleb thought I was messing with him. I kept insisting it had been there. Then Caleb pointed toward the tower stairs. Something was hanging from the railing. A photograph. We walked closer. It was a picture of me, taken from behind while I stood near the campsite the week before. My blood went cold instantly. Across the bottom of the photo, written in black marker, were the words, "You came back." Caleb immediately wanted to leave. We started back down the trail fast. About 10 minutes later, we heard something crashing through the woods parallel to us. Heavy movement. Not animal movement either. Human. Caleb yelled, asking who was there. No answer. Then came the whistling again. 3 short notes. Closer this time. We both started running. I remember branches hitting my face and hearing footsteps somewhere behind us off the trail. At one point, Caleb actually screamed because he thought he saw someone ahead between the trees. We reached the parking lot completely out of breath. The white van sat there waiting, parked directly behind my truck. And this time there were muddy handprints all over my driver's side window. Caleb wanted to call police immediately. We did. 2 deputies came out maybe 40 minutes later. They searched the area around the trail and took the photograph seriously once they saw it. But nobody was found. One deputy eventually admitted there'd been reports over the years about people camping illegally near the old tower. Missing hikers too. Not many, but enough that locals avoided the trail after dark. I never went back. About 8 months later, the fire tower burned down completely. Officials blamed squatters or teenagers, but the weirdest part happened afterward. Caleb called me one night around midnight sounding panicked. Someone had left a photograph on his apartment doorstep.
No envelope.
No note, just a single picture. It showed both of us running down the trail toward the parking lot, taken from deep in the woods behind us.